What's up, kings? Welcome back to the channel, the place where we expose the real truth about women, attraction, and modern dating that most guys are too scared or too blind to see. If you're new here, buckle up, because today you're about to understand something most men go their entire lives completely missing. We're diving into 5 deeply human, psychologically grounded behavioral patterns that women tend to show when they've been without real, meaningful physical and emotional intimacy for a long time. And before you brush that off or oversimplify it, understand this. This isn't about tricks or tactics. This is about awareness. It's about reading what's already happening right in front of you without projecting your fears or your fantasies onto it. And the 5th sign, the one we'll build toward, is subtle on the surface, but once you truly see it, you'll never unsee it again. Now, before we go deeper, I want you to slow down for just a second and reflect. Have you ever been around a woman and felt like something was there, something unspoken, almost electric, but you couldn't quite name it? Maybe she lingered a little longer than necessary, maybe her energy felt warmer, more open, but you dismissed it. Or maybe you noticed certain behaviors and second-guessed yourself, telling yourself you were reading too much into it. And let me ask you this honestly. How many times have you walked away from a situation later thinking, wait, was she actually trying to show me something? That moment, that hesitation, that uncertainty, that's exactly what we're here to clear up. Because most men aren't lacking opportunity, they're lacking interpretation. They're not seeing clearly, and because of that, they miss what's already being offered. My name is Mary Smith, and this is Mindful Senior Living, and what we're really exploring here today goes far beyond dating or attraction in the surface level sense. We're talking about human connection at its most fundamental level, the need to feel seen, to feel desired, to feel safe enough to open up both emotionally and physically. When those needs go unmet for long periods of time, they don't just disappear, they transform. They come out in behaviors, in micro-signals, in emotional expressions that most people don't consciously recognize but deeply feel. So let me ask you something deeper now. Have you ever noticed how people don't always say what they need directly, especially when it comes to intimacy, vulnerability, or desire? Instead, they circle around it. They test it. They express it indirectly, almost like they're asking permission without using words. And if that's true, and it is, then the real question becomes this. Are you emotionally aware enough to recognize those signals when they show up? Or are you still waiting for something obvious, something undeniable, something that feels safe to respond to? Because here's the truth most people won't tell you. When a woman has gone a long time without meaningful, intimate physical connection, not just sex, but real presence, real touch, real emotional safety, her body and her mind don't just shut down. They become more sensitive, more aware, almost like her internal radar turns up. And that sensitivity doesn't show up in loud, dramatic ways. It shows up in subtle shifts, small behaviors, quiet invitations. The first shift that often appears is what psychologists sometimes refer to as a form of touch hunger or skin hunger. And this isn't some abstract concept, it's biological. The human body is wired for physical connection. Your skin alone has millions of receptors designed to process touch, and those signals are directly tied to chemicals like oxytocin and dopamine, which regulate bonding, pleasure, and emotional safety. When those pathways go understimulated for long periods of time, the body doesn't just ignore it, it starts craving it. But here's where most men misunderstand what that looks like. They expect something obvious, flirtation that's direct, physicality that's intentional and clear. But in reality, it rarely shows up that way. Instead, it appears in small, almost dismissible moments. A brief touch on your arm that lingers just a second longer than necessary. A subtle closeness when sitting next to you, where there's clearly more space available, but she chooses proximity. A light adjustment of your collar, your sleeve, your necklace, tiny gestures that don't seem like much on their own, but when you step back and look at the pattern, they begin to tell a story. And here's the part that requires emotional maturity to understand. These moments are not random, they're not meaningless, they're exploratory. They're her way of asking without asking, is this safe? Is this welcome? How will he respond? Because every time she initiates even the smallest form of touch, she's paying attention, not just to what you do, but how you feel. Do you tense up? Do you pull away? Do you freeze and overthink? Or do you stay grounded, present, and receptive? This is where many men unknowingly close doors that were just beginning to open, not because they did something wrong in an obvious way, but because their energy communicated uncertainty. And uncertainty, especially in emotionally sensitive situations, often gets interpreted as lack of interest or lack of confidence. On the other hand, when a man responds with calm awareness, when he doesn't overreact, doesn't rush, but simply meets that moment with presence, it creates a sense of ease. And that ease is what allows the connection to deepen naturally. Think about it like a conversation that's happening without words. She leans in slightly, and instead of pulling back or jumping forward, you stay in that space with her. She touches your arm, and instead of treating it like an accident or overanalyzing it, you acknowledge it subtly through your energy. It becomes a rhythm, a back and forth, a kind of unspoken dance. And this is where I want you to reflect again. How often have you been so focused on what should I do next that you completely missed what was already happening? How often have you been trying to create attraction instead of noticing it? Because there's a big difference between forcing something and recognizing something that's already unfolding. Now, as we move forward, I want you to keep one idea in your mind. None of these behaviors exist in isolation. They're not checkboxes. They're patterns. And the more you train yourself to observe patterns instead of moments, the clearer everything becomes. Because attraction, connection, and emotional openness are not events, they're processes. And in the next part, we're going to go even deeper into how emotional vulnerability begins to surface when that same sense of connection has been missing for a long time, and why the way you respond in those moments can either build a powerful emotional bond or quietly shut it down without you even realizing it. Stay with me, because what comes next is the key to unlocking true presence. As that sense of physical distance lingers over time, something equally important begins to surface on the emotional side. And this is where things become even more revealing, yet far more misunderstood. Because while physical signals can be subtle, emotional signals are often disguised as conversation. They don't always look like attraction at first glance. In fact, they can look like insecurity, overthinking, or even random curiosity. But underneath those questions, there's something much deeper happening. When a woman hasn't felt truly seen, emotionally understood, or connected in a meaningful way for a long time, a kind of quiet gap forms. Not a dramatic emptiness, but a subtle absence of being mirrored, validated, and emotionally held. And instead of stating that need directly, because most people don't, she begins to express it through questions that seem casual on the surface, but are actually layered with emotional intent. She might ask you things like whether you think she's too sensitive, or if she overthinks situations too much. She may bring up her past, her reactions, or even her insecurities in a way that feels almost offhand, like she's just making conversation. But if you really listen, not just to the words, but to the tone, the timing, the way she watches your reaction, you'll realize she's not just asking for your opinion, she's asking how you see her. And this is where emotional intelligence becomes everything, because most men respond to these moments on autopilot. They try to reassure quickly, smooth things over, give a surface-level answer just to keep things light. But what she's actually looking for isn't a quick fix. It's depth, it's presence. It's someone who can sit in that moment with her and reflect something meaningful back. Imagine this for a second. She looks at you and says, "Be honest, do you think I'm too much sometimes?" Now, on the surface, that might sound like a simple question, but underneath it, there's a vulnerability, there's a history, there's a quiet fear of being misunderstood or rejected. And when you respond with something generic like, "No, you're fine," it might seem kind, but it doesn't land. It doesn't meet her where she is emotionally. But when someone responds with awareness, something like acknowledging that she feels deeply, that she experiences things with intensity, and that it's not something to be dismissed but understood, that's when something shifts. Not because you said the right line, but because you demonstrated that you're paying attention on a deeper level. You're not just hearing her, you're seeing her. And this is where a real emotional bridge begins to form, because for someone who has gone without that kind of connection for a long time, being understood feels incredibly powerful. It creates safety, and safety is the foundation for everything that follows. Trust, openness, attraction, even physical closeness. Now here's something important to understand. Emotional openness doesn't always show up as softness. Sometimes it shows up as testing, as contradiction, as moments where she pulls back right after opening up. And if you don't understand why that's happening, it can feel confusing. One moment, she's warm, engaged, leaning in. The next, she's distant, guarded, maybe even slightly dismissive. But this isn't inconsistency for the sake of it. It's self-protection. When someone hasn't experienced consistent emotional safety, they don't fully trust it when it appears. So they test it, not consciously, not strategically, but instinctively. They open a door slightly and then they watch. How does he respond? Does he get uncomfortable? Does he try to fix me? Does he pull away? And again, most people fail here not because they don't care, but because they don't understand. They either overcompensate by trying to solve everything, or they withdraw because they don't know what to say. But what's actually needed in that moment is something much simpler and at the same time much rarer. Steady presence. Being able to listen without immediately reacting. Being able to hold space without trying to control the outcome. That kind of emotional steadiness communicates something powerful without needing to say it directly. It tells her, you don't have to filter yourself here. Now let's shift slightly into something that often overlaps with this emotional opening, and that's the way she begins to present herself around you. Because when someone starts to feel a spark of connection after a long period of emotional or physical distance, their awareness of themselves heightens. Not in a forced or performative way, but in a subtle, almost instinctive way. You might notice that she becomes more intentional with how she carries herself when she's around you. Small adjustments in her appearance, the way she fixes her hair, the way she chooses her outfit, or even the way she holds eye contact a little longer than usual. These are not always conscious decisions. They're often expressions of increased awareness, of wanting to be seen in a certain light by someone whose opinion is beginning to matter. And again, this is where perception matters, because if you're only looking for obvious signals, you'll miss the nuance. You'll assume it's just coincidence, or that she's like that with everyone. But when you start observing patterns, when you notice that certain behaviors only show up in your presence or intensify when you're engaged with her, that's when the picture becomes clearer. There's also something fascinating that happens with body language during this phase. When attraction and emotional openness begin to align, the body often expresses it before the mind fully processes it. She might mirror your posture without realizing it. If you lean in, she leans in. If you slow down your movements, her energy follows. It's not imitation in a conscious sense, it's synchronization. Her focus might become more fixed on you in conversations, even in group settings. Her reactions to your words might carry a slightly higher emotional charge, whether that's laughter, curiosity, or even playful teasing. And one of the most telling signs is consistency. Not a single moment, but repeated alignment over time. Now here's where things can go wrong if not handled with awareness. When men start noticing these signals, there's often a temptation to jump ahead, to escalate quickly, to capitalize on the moment. But connection doesn't work well under pressure. It builds best in a space that feels natural, unforced. So instead of rushing, the more effective approach is to match the pace. If she leans in slightly, you lean in slightly. If she opens up emotionally, you meet that openness with grounded presence. Not by mirroring her words, but by matching her level of engagement. It becomes less about leading aggressively and more about co-creating the interaction. And this is where the idea of a dance really starts to make sense. Not a performance, not something rehearsed, but a responsive flow. You're paying attention, you're adjusting, you're allowing things to unfold without trying to control every step. Let me ask you something here. Have you ever felt that shift in a conversation where everything just flows effortlessly, where there's no awkwardness, no second guessing, just a natural rhythm? That's not random, that's alignment. And when someone has been without that kind of alignment for a long time, they feel it even more strongly when it finally appears. But here's the key distinction. Feeling that connection doesn't automatically mean acting on it impulsively. It means recognizing it, respecting it, and allowing it to develop in a way that feels safe for both people involved. Because ultimately, what you're witnessing in all of these behaviors is not just attraction, it's the reawakening of connection. And how you respond to that reawakening determines whether it grows or quietly fades. And in the next part, we're going to explore something even more complex and often misunderstood, the way emotional testing begins to show up when that connection deepens, and why those moments, as challenging as they may seem, are actually some of the most revealing opportunities to build trust. As this emotional connection deepens, something very interesting begins to happen beneath the surface, and this is where most men start to feel slightly confused, sometimes even unsettled, without fully understanding why. Because just when things seem to be going well, just when the energy feels warm, open, even promising, a shift can occur. Not a dramatic shift, not an obvious one, but a subtle change in tone, in behavior, in emotional temperature. She might become slightly more distant for a moment, or she might say something that feels a little sharp, a little provocative, something that seems almost designed to create a reaction. Or she might open up emotionally and then suddenly pull back, as if she's observing how you respond to the vulnerability she just revealed. And if you don't understand what's happening in that moment, it can feel like inconsistency or mixed signals. But in reality, what you're seeing is something far more human than confusing. You're seeing emotional testing. This is not a game, it's a search for safety. Now, before you misinterpret that word, understand this is not manipulation in the way people often assume. It's not calculated strategy. It's not someone playing games for entertainment. It's a deeply ingrained psychological process that happens when trust is still forming. When someone has been without consistent emotional safety for a long time, they don't simply accept it when it appears. They test it, they probe it, they observe how stable it really is. And the reason for that is simple. Vulnerability, once exposed, cannot be taken back. So before she opens fully, there's a natural instinct to see whether the space she's in is actually safe enough to hold what she's about to reveal. So she might say something like, "I bet you couldn't handle someone like me." Or she might make a comment that slightly challenges your confidence. Or she might pull back emotionally right after a moment of closeness. And what she's really doing in those moments is not trying to push you away permanently, but trying to understand whether you will remain steady or whether you will react in a way that confirms her fears. And this is where men tend to unconsciously create one of three reactions that break the connection without realizing it. Some men try to fix the situation immediately, over-explaining, reassuring too quickly, trying to erase the discomfort. Others become defensive, trying to prove themselves, pushing back emotionally, trying to regain control of the interaction. And some simply retreat, becoming quieter, more distant, unsure of what just happened. But all three reactions communicate something important to her subconscious mind: instability. Because in those moments, what she is actually evaluating is not your words, but your emotional grounding. She is asking, without saying it directly, can I be fully myself here without everything changing? And if your reaction feels unstable, even slightly, it can reinforce hesitation. Not because you did something wrong, but because emotional safety requires consistency more than intensity. Now imagine a different response. Imagine you don't rush to fix anything. You don't get defensive. You don't withdraw. You simply stay present. You acknowledge what was said or what was felt without overloading it with meaning. You remain calm in your tone, steady in your energy, and you allow the moment to exist without forcing it to resolve immediately. In that space, something powerful happens. The emotional tension doesn't escalate, it settles. Because her nervous system is not looking for perfection, it's looking for stability. It's looking for evidence that emotional shifts don't lead to chaos. And when she experiences that kind of steadiness, especially if it's unfamiliar to her, it creates something very subtle but very important. Trust begins to anchor itself, not in words, but in experience. Now, alongside this emotional testing, another layer often appears, and this is where many people completely misread the situation. Because during this phase, she may begin to fluctuate between closeness and distance. One moment she feels very engaged, very open, very present. The next moment she might seem slightly withdrawn, distracted, or even unsure. And instead of seeing this as contradiction, it's more accurate to see it as integration. Her emotional system is adjusting. Part of her is drawn toward connection, and another part is still assessing whether that connection is safe enough to fully relax into. This is why patience becomes so important here. Not passive waiting, but grounded patience. The ability to stay consistent without trying to force clarity too early. Because premature pressure in this stage often collapses what is still forming. And this is also where you begin to see something deeper in behavior patterns. She may start creating small moments of proximity that seem casual on the surface, but carry emotional weight underneath, asking you to help with something small, finding reasons to be around you without a clearly defined purpose, extending conversations slightly longer than necessary. These are not random. They are ways of staying close while still feeling emotionally safe. But here's where emotional intelligence really matters, because the goal is not to interpret every behavior as a signal to escalate. The goal is to understand the emotional language behind the behavior. Sometimes closeness is just closeness. Sometimes vulnerability is just vulnerability. And sometimes hesitation is not rejection, it is protection. If you move too fast here, you risk collapsing the very trust that is beginning to form. But if you move too slowly out of fear, you may also miss the natural rhythm of connection. So the real skill is balance. The ability to stay attuned without becoming reactive, to observe without over-interpreting, to respond without forcing direction. Think about a time when you felt unsure about someone, not because they did anything wrong, but because you weren't sure how safe it was to be fully open with them. What did you do? You probably tested them in subtle ways. You watched how they reacted under small pressure. You noticed how they responded when you were quiet or when you were slightly distant. You weren't trying to play games. You were trying to feel safe, and that is exactly what is happening on the other side as well. So when she says something slightly challenging, or when she pulls back for a moment, the deeper question is not, how do I fix this? The deeper question is, what is this moment asking me to show about myself? Because these moments are not obstacles to connection. They are filters for it. They reveal whether connection is built on reaction or on stability. And stability is what creates depth over time. Now, as we move closer to the final layer of what we're exploring, we're going to shift into something that often gets misunderstood entirely. The way emotional and physical signals begin to merge when comfort reaches a certain point, and why the strongest sign of all is not intensity, but permission. The permission to be near, to be present, without hesitation, without explanation, without fear of misinterpretation. And that's where everything becomes unmistakably clear. As this dynamic continues to unfold, something very important begins to emerge. And it often goes unnoticed by men who are still focused on obvious signals or dramatic moments. Because at this stage, the most powerful sign is no longer intensity, uncertainty, or emotional fluctuation. It is something far quieter, but far more revealing. It is permission. Permission doesn't look like a big confession or a bold declaration. It doesn't always come with words. Instead, it shows up in comfort, in ease, in the absence of resistance. It is when someone no longer feels the need to overthink proximity, interaction, or presence. They simply allow it. And when a woman begins to consistently allow your presence in her space without hesitation, without creating emotional distance, without second-guessing every interaction, that is often a sign that something deeper than curiosity is forming. It is a sign that her nervous system no longer perceives you as uncertain territory. You have become familiar in a safe way. This is where many of the earlier signals begin to integrate. The touch that once felt exploratory becomes more natural. The emotional openness that once came with hesitation becomes more fluid. The testing that once felt sharp becomes softer or disappears altogether. And instead of fluctuating between closeness and distance, there is a steadier rhythm. She might still engage in playful teasing or small emotional checks, but the energy behind it changes. It is no longer about verifying safety. It becomes part of connection itself, a shared language rather than a question. And one of the most telling signs at this stage is not what she says, but what she allows. She allows longer moments of silence without discomfort. She allows proximity without constantly adjusting or recalibrating. She allows conversations to continue without needing to retreat emotionally. And most importantly, she allows herself to be seen in a more unfiltered way. Now, this is where the concept of emotional safety becomes fully visible, because real attraction, real connection does not sustain itself on tension alone. It stabilizes when both people feel they can exist fully in the same space without performance, without constant evaluation, without fear of misinterpretation. And when that happens, something very natural begins to emerge. The desire for closeness becomes less about chasing or decoding signals and more about shared experience. Time together feels less like analysis and more like presence. You stop asking, "What does this mean?" and start simply experiencing what is. This is also where physical closeness, if it develops, becomes less about signals and more about comfort. Not rushed, not forced, not performative, just natural progression from emotional ease. And when emotional safety is truly present, physical expression does not need to be interpreted aggressively or prematurely. It unfolds as an extension of trust. But there is an important grounding truth here that must be understood clearly. None of these patterns exist to be manipulated. They are not a system to decode people like puzzles, or to predict outcomes with certainty. Human connection is not mechanical. It is fluid, emotional, and deeply individual. What these observations really offer is awareness. The ability to see beyond surface level confusion and understand that most behavior is not random. It is communication, sometimes conscious, often unconscious, but always meaningful when viewed with care. And perhaps the most important shift that happens when you begin to understand this is not that you become hyper-focused on signs, but that you become more present in your own behavior. You start noticing how you respond, how you show up, how you create emotional space for others. Because attraction and connection are never one-sided processes. They are co-created. So instead of asking only, "What is she doing?" a more powerful question becomes, "What energy am I bringing into this interaction? Am I present or am I anxious? Am I grounded or am I reactive? Am I trying to control the outcome or am I allowing the connection to develop naturally?" Because in the end, what people remember most is not perfect words or perfect timing. They remember how they felt in your presence, whether they felt safe, whether they felt seen, whether they felt emotionally steady around you. And that brings us to the final reflection. Everything we've discussed throughout these signs, touch, emotional openness, testing, proximity, comfort, they are all variations of one core human need, the need to feel safe while being seen. When that need is met, connection deepens naturally. When it is not, confusion arises. Not because people are complicated, but because safety has not yet been established. So if there is one thing to take from all of this, it is not a set of techniques or strategies. It is awareness. Awareness of yourself, awareness of others, and awareness of the space between you where connection either grows or fades. And if this video helped you see things a little more clearly, then don't just leave it here. Reflect on your own experiences. Think about the moments you misunderstood, the signals you missed, or the connections you rushed, because awareness only becomes valuable when it is applied. If you found value in this, let me know in the comments what part resonated with you the most. And if you want to go deeper into understanding emotional patterns, stay connected. Until next time, stay aware, stay grounded, and above all, stay present in the way you connect with others.